Hey there, welcome back to the Toy Room. This episode is going to focus on one of the most ubiquitous series of toys in the 1960s, the Matchbox cars. Matchbox cars started out in 1953. They were manufactured by a British company named Lesney, and they got that name from a combination of two of their co-owners. And they were a die casting company, and one of their first major successes was a replica of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation coach. And in that same year, in 1953, one of the co-owners had a daughter, and there was a rule at their school that they couldn't bring a toy that couldn't fit in a matchbox. So he took one of their other vehicles and he scaled it down for her to put in a matchbox, and that was effectively the first Matchbox car. Of course, it was marketing genius to package these small vehicles in what had the appearance of a matchbox. In the 1950s, the cars were, of course, a little smaller. They were about 2 inches, and later, by the 60s, they were about 3 inches long. And the thing about the Matchbox series is they were always 75 in the series, and if they introduced a new vehicle into it, they dropped one out of the line, so there would always be this 75 cars in the current collection. So in the creation of these miniatures, the designers at Matchbox would often take detailed photographs of the actual vehicles, and sometimes they even had the original blueprints, and they were able to come up with a very high level of detail for such a small vehicle. And here we see a taxi cab here, and up it's coming here. There he is. Do we have another fare? Matchbox cars were very popular throughout the 1950s and 1960s, and by the late 60s had reached what might be considered a golden age of the Matchbox cars. But something happened in 1969 that effectively knocked the bottom out of their US sales. Rival company Mattel Toys had come up with something called Hot Wheels. And there it is. There's a Hot Wheel. Matchbox responded fairly quickly to the threat that Mattel Toys posed with their Hot Wheels by coming up with their own version called Matchbox Superfast. But it wasn't really enough to return them to the glory days they once enjoyed. And currently, Matchbox is, in a roundabout way, now owned by Mattel Toys. And of course, if you have Matchbox cars, you need a case to put them in. And this is the first case that my brother Tom and I had. And ironically, it was made by Mattel, the rival toy maker at that time, well before Hot Wheels. And it's a miniature car collector's showcase, and it was able to hold up to 48 cars. I think it had kind of a dubious design, though, and this one's emptied out. I have since moved my stuff to a different case, and it has two sides with these flaps that didn't hold very well. On the side of the case, you can see there's my name. I think my dad had a label maker. Very handy to have my name on the side of the case there. And on the back, it's pretty kind of dirty here. These are my cars, and there's a list of the 48, and there's some faded pencil handwriting where I had filled in a couple of the names of the cars. Some years ago, I moved my cars from its original case to this case, which is actually a Lesney product, which is Superfast, and we got this much later, and that's why it's in much better shape, and it's really a nicer case to put your vehicles in here. And you see it had nicer chambers, and you're probably wondering what's in there. I took these vehicles out of their paper towel shrouds so that you could get a better look at them. These are called Matchbox's model of yesteryears. They're a little larger than the regular Matchbox cars, and mine are in pretty good shape. I guess I didn't really feel inclined to take these old-timey cars and take them out in the dirt or something, you know. And I always kind of liked this one this one back here, because it reminded me of the Munster Mobile. So these are my original vehicles, and you know, some of the this here is the Honda motorcycle that you could pull behind the Jeep, you know. So that's a nice one. This one here has a little boat on it, and that's kind of neat. This is my original snowplow, which I obviously liked a little bit, and I must have plowed some stuff there with, and that's a little nick. This is an early one we had, you know, a pink trail. This is a girder truck, and you could actually take the girders off there and put them together. a nice Ford tractor. I believe that my brother and I got our first Matchbox cars when my mom sent away for a couple of Matchbox cars from an offer on the back of an ice cream cone package. And we got this here is a Cadillac ambulance, and you can see that this one is well used, but still has its tires, so not too bad. I always liked this one because it came with a couple cows, Here's a nice combine. Another case that I had was this one, and it was made by Aurora, and it's smaller, and I kind of like this one because of its small size. And it wasn't made for Matchbox cars, I don't think. It must have been made for maybe HO scale road racing cars, that Aurora might have made. And so there's a couple in here. Look at this one here. This got a lot of use out in the sand there, I can tell you that one. And this is one of my first cars here, and I no longer have them, but I like this one because it had a little hunter and a dog with it. And it's pretty beat up, and I painted the roof a little green and red, and green on the back there. So that's pretty beat up. And there's some other. Oh, this is an old one here too. This crash tender there. And another interesting piece that my brother and I each had was a car carrier, and I think those are the 4 original cars that came with the set, and they're in pretty good shape. And this car is interesting because some of the vehicles, their hood, or in this case, the door opens up. Oh yeah, let's see what's under the hood of this beauty. Wow, look at that. Matchbox also created a series of king-size vehicles, and there's my original dump truck that I have there, and I put it next to a more traditionally sized refuse truck. Of course, it's kind of interesting in that when my brother and I would get Matchbox cars, we would immediately discard the boxes and put them in these cases. And in fact, I don't even really remember ever seeing the boxes. But as an adult collector, my brother and I would go to toy shows sometimes, and I always look for the vehicles that had the original box. And that adds a lot to the enjoyment of having one. As an adult, over the years, I built up a little bit of a collection of Matchbox cars that have the original box in pretty good shape. And you can see here are all the boxes that I have. And this one at the end is kind of interesting because it's an actual blister pack. Those might be worth a little more. It's a bland vehicle. It's just a trailer, but that's kind of interesting. This race car was always one of the favorites. It's kind of a neat Greyhound bus. I have this interesting pony trailer. The horses are still on the sprue, so it's a nice mint condition example of this. I have to see what this one looks like, so we'll take it out of the box. See a house on a truck. Well, this one's a little unusual, the box, in that it has a little illustration on there. And I guess that's not a house, it's a hut, because on the bottom it says it's a sight hut truck. At shows, you might be able to get some of the more average collected vehicles for around $20, $30, but then there's some that you can pay quite a bit more. I still have my original snow track, but it's missing the treads. They must have rotted away or something. And I bought this one at a show and I paid $38. This is the vehicle that I paid the most for. It was marked $85. I may have gotten some discount on it, but still quite a bit for a Matchbox car. It has a nicely illustrated box there, and it's a ice cream canteen. And I always like these ones, like I said, that have figures in them. And this has a nice little thing: cones, wafers, lolly bricks, whatever. And there's somebody in there has a cone in their hand dispensing up a nice ice cream treat. This was my favorite Matchbox that I had when I was growing up, and I guess in part it's because there's a person driving the car, so there's someone in the car driving, and there's a dog in the back seat with its head out the window, so I thought it was a kind of a neat vehicle. And this is not my original one, and I'll tell you in a bit what happened to that. Toward the end of my college years, a young woman came over, and I was taking her to a Tom Petty concert. In a fit of romanticism, I gave her my favorite Matchbox car. Of course, later on, I regretted doing that. But years later, I was able to find that same Matchbox car at an indoor flea market at a shopping mall, and I paid $5 for it, and that was a cheap price to pay to reclaim my favorite Matchbox. So a little bit of advice to any of you would-be romantics out there. Don't give away your vintage toys. A broken heart will always mend, but you might not be able to find that particular favorite again. And now, it's time for a cautionary tale from the toy room. Okay? This is a 1968 Matchbox catalog, and their lineup of the 75 vehicles was pretty constant throughout the mid to late 60s. And it's handy to have because it's a guideline to tell which vehicles that I don't have yet and which ones I want to collect. And so it's a nicely illustrated book here. Oh, and here's the TV service van that my younger brother Tom had, and that's a really neat one. That one is one that's kind of highly sought after, and of course you need to have the little TV sets with it and the ladder and the antenna on the truck. In 1993, Coca-Cola came out with OK Soda, and they had a very unconventional marketing campaign. And one of the things that they did was they used underground comic book artists to illustrate the cans, and I was a Dan Clowes fan, so he did one of the cans, and that's the one there. And it didn't last long. This soda pop was only out for 7 months, and I didn't know it at the time, but I read today that it was just test marketed in a few cities, and one of those was Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it never went nationwide, so it's sort of a collectible in its own right. And I looked it up on eBay, and some knucklehead was trying to sell one of the cans for like $10,000, and I'll sell you one of mine for $1,000, and you'll save yourself $9,000 if you want to do that. So anyway, in 1993, I bought a 6-pack of OK Soda, and I never opened it up, and I thought, oh, this'll be neat, I'm going to save this. And I had it in the toy room next to my Matchbox catalog here. And unfortunately, what happened is, over time, these aluminum cans, they've developed these pinhole leaks, and it spread out the contents, and it damaged my Matchbox catalogs. And unfortunately, next to the 6-pack of OK Soda was also this Schwinn catalog from 1969 that was picked up around the time that I got my 5-speed Stingray, which is still hanging out in the garage to this day. So that's the day that tragedy struck in the toy room, and I would recommend to anybody that collects soda pop collectibles, especially in cans, don't put them next to valuable paper collectibles. Not a good idea. Well, there you go. A cautionary tale from the toy room, a little bit of romance. So until next time, so long and keep on rolling. Where's my prop?